Hello, this is Papa B reading, and I'm continuing in the story called The Magician's Nephew, which is part of the complete Chronicles of Narnia, published by HarperCollins, and the book is written by C.S. Lewis. I'm in chapter 3 right now, the second part. The chapter is titled The Wood Between the Worlds. The heroes, and the heroine, rather, is Diggory and Polly. And they're in the wood between the worlds, and they're getting ready to take an adventure. After a good deal of arguing, they agreed to put on their green rings. Green for safety, said Diggory. So you can't help remembering which is which, and hold hands and jump. But as soon as they seemed to be getting back to Uncle Andrew's study, or even to their own world, Polly was to shout change, and they would slip off their greens and put on their yellows. Diggory wanted to be the one who shouted change, but Polly wouldn't agree. They put on the green rings, took hands, and once more shouted, 1, 2, 3, go. This time it worked. It's very hard to tell what it felt like, for everything happened so quickly. At first, there were bright lights moving about in a black sky. Diggory always thinks these were stars and even swears that he saw Jupiter quite close enough to see its moon. But almost at once there were rows and rows of roofs and chimney pots about them, and they could see St. Paul's and knew they were looking at London. But you could see through the walls of all the houses. Then they could see Uncle Andrew, very vague and shadowy, but getting clearer and more solid looking all the time, just as if he were coming into focus. But before he became quite real, Polly shouted change. And it did change. And our world faded away like a dream. And the green light above grew stronger and stronger till their heads came out of the pool and they scrambled ashore. And there was the wood all about them, as green and bright and still as ever. The whole thing had taken less than a minute. There, said Diggory, that's all right. Now for the adventure. Any pool will do. Come on, let's try that one. Stop, said Polly. Aren't we going to mark this pool? They stared at each other and turned quite white as they realized the dreadful thing that Diggory had just been going to do. For there were any number of pools in the wood, and the pools were all alike, and the trees were all alike, so that if they had once left behind a pool that led to our world, without making some sort of landmark, the chances would have been 100 to 1 against their ever finding it again. Diggory's hand was shaking as he opened his penknife and cut out a long strip of turf on the bank of the pool. The soil, which smelled nice, was of a rich reddish brown and showed up quite well against the green. It's a good thing one of us has some sense, said Polly. Excuse me. Well, don't keep on gassing about it, said Diggory. Come along. I want to see what's in one of the other pools. And Polly gave him a pretty sharp answer, and he said something even nastier in reply. The quarrel lasted for several minutes, but it would be dull to write it all down. Let us skip on to the moment at which they stood with beating hearts and rather scared faces on the edge of an unknown pool with their yellow rings on, and held hands and once more said, 1, 2, 3, go, splash. Once again it hadn't worked. This pool, too, appeared to be only a puddle. Instead of reaching a new world, they only got their feet wet and splashed their legs for the second time that morning. If it was a morning, it seemed to be always the same time in the wood between the worlds. Blast and botheration, exclaimed Diggory. What's going wrong now? We've put on our yellow rings on all right. He said yellow for the outward journey. Now the truth was that Uncle Andrew, who knew nothing about the wood between the worlds had quite a wrong idea about the rings. The yellow ones weren't outward rings, and the green ones weren't homeward rings. At least not the way he thought. The stuff of which both were made had all come from the wood. The stuff in the yellow rings had the power of drawing you into the wood, and the stuff that wanted to get back to its own place, the in-between place. But the stuff in the green rings, was stuff that was trying to get out of its own place, so that a green ring would take you out of the wood into a world. Uncle Andrew, you see, was working with things he did not really understand. Most magicians are. Of course, Diggory did not realize the truth quite nearly either, or not till later. But when they had talked it over, they decided to try their green rings on the new pool, just to see what happened. "I'm game if you are," said Polly. But she really said this because in her heart of hearts, she now felt sure that neither kind of ring was going to work at all in the new pool, and there was nothing worse to be afraid of than another splash. I'm not quite sure that Diggory had the same feeling. At any rate, when they had both put on their greens and come back to the edge of the water and taken hands again, they were certainly a good deal more cheerful and less solemn than they had been the first time. 1, 2, 3, go, said Diggory, and they jumped. And that ends chapter 3 of The Magician's Nephew. Please come back and we'll read some more. Bye-bye. This is Papa B reading.